I've enjoyed so much over the years with ACC. And I think today is a really good day to have a philosophy of life. And so maybe as we work through the program, if you don't have one now, it'll serve you well from this day forward. A little bit about the term philosophy. It comes from two Greek roots, philo meaning love, Sophia meaning wisdom. One of the things I like to say about philosophy is if you find someone who claims to have wisdom, beware, because loving it is not the same thing as having it. We've all experienced that difference in one way or another in our lives. Instead, what a philosopher does is pursue wisdom like a lover, and always thinking about, okay, how can I be wiser, or what's the wisdom angle to this situation, and works at it. And that's, to me, the mark of a true philosopher, rather than someone claiming to have it. It's also the case, there's some interesting differences you can think about between or among intelligence and knowledge and wisdom. I would invite you to think of somebody you know, and unmute please and tell me about this person, who's maybe very intelligent, very knowledgeable, but not very wise. Anybody want to go? I've got an example in mind that Stan will appreciate. Anybody want to go first, or I'll tell mine?
Anybody got it? Have we got anyone that would like to?
Really smart, knows a lot. Well, this person I have in mind, well known to Stan. He's a lot smarter than I am, and just knows a tremendous amount. But where I come to doubt his wisdom is anything that could be done simply and well enough, he will try to complicate so much that it kind of gets bogged down. If something is 98% good, he'll work really hard to make it 99.5%. If you want to go out to eat with him, he'll go make a spreadsheet of all the different restaurant options and all the criteria that would make a good restaurant, and then he'll weight the criteria, and 2 hours later you're trying to work through where are we going to go to eat, and you're really getting hungry by now. So I bet you know who I'm talking about, Stan. Yep. Anybody else got somebody like that? Okay, well, what about the reverse? How about somebody who radiates wisdom, even though maybe didn't go to school very much, or doesn't have some test to prove how smart he or she is, but does seem to have that elusive and probably hard to define quality of wisdom? Now remember, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, so if you've got, unmute yourself if you've got someone that or something that you'd like to share. I'm going to share something that is more to your first question, Olin, and it's my best friend, one of the smartest people I've ever met. But she makes really bad business decisions, and she thinks she's an entrepreneur, but she really doesn't. She doesn't look at it the right way. So it's always fascinating to me that, you know, she's got a PhD and got a couple more degrees than I've got. And sometimes my decisions are way better than hers as far as making choices. So yeah, that would be one that I would throw in there. Anybody
Yes,
else?
yeah.
Okay, no one's going to share with us
Maybe,
today.
maybe what we're getting at with wisdom is, among other things, the ability to assess the relevance and importance of various facts about the situation. You know, a very knowledgeable person might be aware of 20 facts about a situation, but which of the one or two really matter? And which of the others can safely be put to the side or maybe even ignored? Knowing the relevance, making those kind of value judgments in situations, I think of as a quality of a wise person. Anyway, whatever that capacity is for wisdom, that's what a true philosopher is saying he or she is all about pursuing and hoping to gain more of.
Joelle and I we know somebody who is one of the wisest persons we've ever met, the two of us. And the person is a community college president in Montana. You know who I'm talking about, Joelle. He is unassuming, intelligent, able to bring people together with different opinions, get things done, and to be a friend. I once took a trip with him. We went down to the Missoula airport, and at least, 6 to 8 people would say, they'd come up, well, how you doing, Joe? And this included the person cleaning the toilet. This included the person running the place. And we flew together to Washington, and the number dropped down to 2 or 4 at the airport. Everybody was attracted by Joe. Do you have anything else to say about Joe, Joelle?
Joe has also a lot of wisdom. He kind of looks at the situation and straight away kind of evaluate everything and comes up with the right answer or the right decision. He's just like, and as Harvey says, unassuming, but it's just, I don't know, you just drink his words.
Well, a great example is he was invited to be on the board of the Minnesota Federal Reserve, and he never knew why it is. And then at the end of his term, he invited everybody to his little cabin on Flathead Lake, and they all came. And there were helicopters with service, and all kinds of protection, and all of the people who are in the pantheon, they came and said, I know Joe. No, it isn't that he knew somebody, they knew Joe, and we're talking about people who are in the international spotlight.
Right.
Alan Greenspan was there, and he's very proud to say, I know Joe.
That's good. One last thing about philosophy. Thank you for the contributions, Susan and Harvey and Joelle. The last point, a lot of philosophy is very theoretical. In fact, I remember one time I was trying to explain to my mother what some philosophy class I was taking was all about, and she just sort of shook her head and said, I just can't see how learning about that would ever make any kind of practical difference in a person's life. Why would you devote yourself to something that was so far removed from any kind of usefulness? Though about 50 years ago, the importance of applied philosophy really started to grow in the area of, and it came from the area of medical ethics. as the medical technology advanced to the point where we could do all kinds of things at the beginning of life and the end of life, when people were so precarious that they used to just die right away. But life can now be rescued from a very from a neonate who has very severe problems, maybe is born very prematurely, and then what kind of life is that person going to have? And life, as we know, can be extended way beyond where it used to be. And so there's really medical ethics and some of those issues with the advances of technology that gave a big boost to applied philosophy, and it spread out to a lot of areas, other areas as well. Business ethics is a big area in philosophy right now. So I would say in my lifetime of studying philosophy, it began as with a very, very heavy theoretical emphasis and has moved into a lot of applied stuff, I think in a good way. And of course, having a philosophy of life is a matter of applied philosophy. It's not just something you think about, it's something you're trying to put into action. Well, why have a philosophy of life? And there could be no good reason. Probably there's some people who get through life without, although I claim that everybody has one, without ever looking at it or trying to figure out what it is. It's also the case that there are some times that it might be better than others for working this out. You think about the studies that are made in developmental psychology of how people get ready for different kinds of learning or understanding or insight at different stages of their lives. So maybe if you can't come up with something real good now, if you wait another 10 years, you'll be in a better position. Or as people get to be as old as I am, you look back and say, well, I guess I missed the boat. I could have come up with something pretty good 2 or 3 decades ago, but now it's just past the time. But on the positive side, I would say having a philosophy of life helps a person be centered, have a focus, something to come back to, some way of distinguishing in your life, what's the difference between what's really central versus what's peripheral, what doesn't matter that much. And also I found it to be a good way of introducing myself when I meet people. And I do enjoy meeting people, and my wife teases me about working the room and going around and introducing myself. Well, as you get to know someone, sometimes having a philosophy of life and knowing what it is and being able to graft that into an introduction of yourself can be helpful, illuminating. And also I say acquitting yourself. I bet I'm not the only person in this group where people have sometimes said, why did he do that? Or where was he coming from when he said that? And so we do behave in ways or say things that are sometimes incomprehensible to other people or don't make any sense. And acquitting yourself, I guess, is all about explaining, presenting an apology in the old-fashioned sense, explaining yourself, giving reasons why you are what you are and say what you say and do what you do. And so coming into a philosophy of life and having that as a way of making your actions and your life make sense to other people can be useful. Harvey, it looks like you got something to say.
Let me give you a thought that I think is completely self-explanatory. It is better to light one small candle than to curse the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Enough.
Is that your philosophy of life?
In part. I don't think you can give a 25-word or less.
Yeah.
I'll try one more and then I'll leave it, is that everything that you want it will find you if you work hard enough.
Okay. All right. That's good. So going back to the lighting the candle, if you, so to speak, light the candle, do something small in a situation where it may not seem much and people wonder, why are you wasting your time? Well, you can say that's part of the philosophy that I try to live by. It's somewhat akin to what was the story about the thousands of dying starfish on the seashore, and there's one guy throwing a few of them back in the ocean so that they can live. And how much good is that? Well, who does it? What does that matter? And well, it matters to the one that got thrown back in the ocean. Okay. How do you discover what your philosophy of life is? Some ideas here. What if you've ever tried to figure out what are my highest priorities in life? What matters most to me? That could lead you to a statement of your philosophy. In philosophical debates, this is sometimes called the search for the summum bonum, or the supreme human good. What is the good thing in life that is better than any other good thing in life? And there are about a dozen different nominations for that among different philosophers. Pleasure is a pretty common one. Power, you think about Thomas Hobbes or Friedrich Nietzsche. They thought that power was more important than anything else. God, love, wisdom itself. So what a philosophy, you might discover your philosophy of life by looking at what your top priorities are. Past statements, have you ever written something down in like this that you could look back to and say, oh, well, in my journal, in my diary 15 years ago, I wrote down, this is what I was all about. If you could find that, maybe looking at it and saying, well, is that still my philosophy of life, the central piece of wisdom that I try to live by? And that gets to the next bullet, evolution. Most everybody evolves in what becomes central by way of a guiding light for their life. I know when I was about 19, had a wonderful childhood with very caring parents. But when I was 19 or 20, I was striving for independence more than anything else. And I didn't need any more sort of parental care. I wanted to do it all for myself, and I wanted to progress into adulthood on my own terms. And so if that meant not getting involved in anything that would tie me down, sounded pretty good to me at that point in my life. I think later in life, I have come to appreciate interdependence more than independence. And in fact, I think those who strive to be completely independent end up isolated and not doing so well. What do others think your philosophy of life is? If by knowing you, listening to you, watching how you behave, you could ask some others and maybe get some insight. What decisions have you made? You ever heard that riddle? If you got 3 frogs sitting on the lily pad and one of them decides to jump off, how many frogs are then on the lily pad? Anybody heard that?
2 frogs.
The answer is 3, because making a decision is not equivalent to acting. And so of the decisions you made, which ones did you actually carry out? And there's kind of a sequence to the ones on the right-hand column. With actions, you develop habits. What are your habits? What do you habitually do? And then over maybe years, you can see trends in your life that might even be a longer term, kind of a longitudinal view of what's your philosophy of life rather than a single action or decision. So I'll pause here, see if what you might have to say about these ways of figuring out what yours is. Okay.
I have something.
Oh,
to
well,
add.
Pat's here. So do you want to be, you want people to see you or just hear you?
You can just hear me.
Okay.
But one of the things that it makes me aware of is when we seek advice from our elders is because they've had enough time to become a little wiser. I also believe that everyone has a philosophy of life, whether they have written it down or not. But two, I think writing it down gives you a focus. So I'm sort of interested in doing that. That's all I have to say.
Learn from your elders. Of course, there's no fool like an old fool. So, okay, thanks, Pat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what about some examples? I'll start off with Socrates. He's on trial in an Athenian court for getting the youngsters in that community to try to think for themselves rather than just listen to their elders, to your point, Pat.
Mm-hmm.
And as in the course of the dialogue by Plato called the Apology, Socrates comes out with that immortal line, "Know thyself." So in many ways, I could see how that would be his philosophy of life. Another example from Plato is Cephalus. This comes from Plato's Republic, probably the greatest work of philosophy in Western civilization. It's all about, well, can we define justice? But it starts out, of course, Socrates is sitting around trying to get people in conversation, and the first person that comes along in the dialogue is a rich old man named Cephalus. He's on his way to make his sacrifices to the gods, but he's willing to talk to Socrates for a little while. They get into a little banter to start off with. In fact, Cephalus is, I don't know how old he is, but he's pretty old. And Socrates teases him and says, "Well, Cephalus, are you still able to serve a woman?" And Cephalus laughs and he said, "Thank goodness I am finally free from the tyranny and the frenzy of lust and desire. I finally have a little bit of peace in my life." But then Socrates says, "Okay, well, what do you consider to be," he doesn't say your philosophy of life, it's what do you consider a just life to consist of? And Cephalus comes right out with it. He said, it's really a couple of things. Tell the truth and pay your debts. So that's his philosophy of life. Tell the truth and pay your debts. So to whom you owe something, pay that debt. And not just in narrow money terms, but give people what they deserve in return for what they've given to you. Now, Socrates comes up with a clever way of showing that that's not a really good philosophy of life. It's got a flaw in it. And Cephalus just laughs it off and goes off to do his sacrifice. He didn't hurt his feelings. Augustine, the first really great Christian philosopher, was struggling with the question, okay, does a Christian life consist of obeying a lot of rules and regulations, the Jewish law, the 613 commandments of the mitzvot, certainly the biblical writers had some things to say about that topic, but Augustine finally came down with an answer to those questions that's called antinomianism. Of course, you know what that means. Nomianism has to do with laws, so against any kind of law. And Augustine said it really just comes down to love God, and do as you please. And if you really do love God, you're not going to go astray. Love God and do as you please. don't get all twisted up in all the intricacies of this rule and that one. Just love God and do as you please. So again, I think in the announcement for this program, I said, well, think about a motto. Brevity is the only rule. He did a good job there. How about Polonius? Stan, you were an English major. You remember who he was, right? Why don't you tell us?
Absolutely. He was the father of Hamlet, I believe.
No, Laertes.
Laertes, okay. And he is famous for giving Laertes windy advice about how to succeed and become a mature young man. And I think he violated every precept in giving that advice, every precept that he gave in giving that advice.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Laertes is about to go on a trip. And the immortal line from that speech to Laertes was, this above all things, to thine own self be true. So be true to yourself. Maybe Shakespeare stole it from something earlier, but it was really Polonius who got to whom we trace back that line. Didn't he get stabbed by a sword when he was hiding behind a curtain too?
Yes.
He got in trouble. Some others, the golden rule, of course, that goes without saying. The whole duty that's a phrase from, I believe, the 1925 Anglican Book of Common Prayer, and which says the whole duty of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. So again, a very condensed, but kind of all-encompassing statement of a philosophy of life. Glorify God and enjoy him forever. Serenity prayer. Can anybody quote that? God, give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can.
Yeah.
And what's the last line?
The wisdom to know the difference.
Wisdom to know the difference.
Wisdom, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a little longer than some of these others. Boy Scout motto, everybody knows that, right?
Be prepared.
Be prepared. Yes. Okay. That's a pretty good one. Adapt, or what's the word I've left out? Adapt or die.
Die.
Yeah, adapt or die. All I want to do, this is from a Sheryl Crow song. All I want to do is have some fun.
Yeah.
Okay, I know some people like that.
Yeah.
Zell Miller was the governor of Georgia, and I got to hear him make a speech one time, and he gave something that's always stuck with me in that speech. He said, when my brothers and I were growing up, my mother would always say, take what you want and pay for it. Thus saith the Lord. Take what you want, pay for it. Thus saith the Lord. He said, I was in my 20s or 30s before I discovered that this is not in the Bible. But it's a pretty interesting philosophy of life. Gerald Ford Jr. Maybe you all know that he was not born with that name. His mother was married to an abusive man in Nebraska. Omaha, I believe, is where he was born. The abuse got so bad, his mother took her son when he was a year or two old and got away from this guy and moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and met a man named Gerald Ford. Excuse me. became senior, I guess, and Gerald Ford Sr. Is a paint manufacturer, Grand Rapids, adopted the boy, and it gave him his name, and that's how Gerald Ford got his name. A couple of decades later, and by the way, his natural father never did anything to support Gerald growing up, but his adopted father was very generous, a really good man. But one day, Gerald was in his 20s, I think, working a summer job or something like that in college, and his natural father shows up in a fancy car, nice looking suit, says, "Hey, let's go out to eat lunch." So Gerald says, all right. They go out to eat lunch, and they get to know one another a little bit. First time he'd seen his father since he was 1 or 2 years old. And the father drove him back to his office where he was working, and tossed him a $20 bill, and said, "Okay, so long." And young Ford was so overcome with rage and shame and grief. If you can imagine this, he just went back to his office and broke down and cried for a while. And he was sort of desperate to put some perspective into this story, or into these events. So he opened up his Bible and turned to the book of Proverbs, and where it says, "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not to thine own understanding." And he adopted that from that moment as his life motto. So I thought, especially since Gerald Ford is from Michigan, that'd be interesting to the people in Michigan. The U.S. Army had a recruiting slogan. I don't know if they still use it, but what was it 20 years ago? Anybody remember? Be all
You can be.
Be all that you can be. In other words, fulfill your potential. I think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs in that connection, and self-actualization at the top. And it's also very Aristotelian. I once met a lady down in Texas, and I was asking her about her philosophy of life. And she said, "Well, my philosophy of life is success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm." And made me laugh. And dealing with failure, indeed, without being destroyed by it, is a very important part of life. Jan Leader was a lady I worked with in Texas also, and she came up with a great one. Hers is, she told me hers, it's everybody's an idiot, me included. And the reason why that's so great a philosophy of life is it explains so much. Again, well, what about mine? I grew up during the 1950s, and for boys anyway of that time, there was a Davy Crockett craze. You remember that, Stan? It was
I guess
maybe
not.
Promoted by Walt Disney, and all the boys wanted to wear coonskin caps and have a Davy Crockett blanket. And there was a song about Davy Crockett that included the story about him being the king of the wild frontier. Mm-hmm. And it included his philosophy of life: make sure you're right and then go ahead. And so that stuck with me from the age of about 7. And I'd still say, well, if you ask me what mine is, that's what it is. And what I like about it is it's got contemplation, kind of look before you leap aspect to it, but also has action. And don't sit around thinking about it all day long. At a certain point, you've got to be sure enough and go ahead and do something. So those are some examples Oh, there's the one from Ford. I put this slide in case I had a senior moment and couldn't remember it. This is the last slide from me, and then it'll be your turn. What are criteria for a good philosophy of life? I got 6 C's here. Consistency and coherence are 2 just almost universal criteria for good philosophical systems of any kind. Consistent means just not contradicting yourself. And there are some people, I would have to say, their philosophy of life is pretty self-contradictory. And these are people who are highly tuned into ambiguities or nuances of life. Have you ever known anybody, if you ask about the nature of something, you'll get a reply like this: well, it is and it isn't. Right? It is and it isn't. Or you want to do this? Well, I do and I don't. I've known people like that, and everything they say, they're looking at both sides so much, it appears that they have trouble with any kind of consistency in their thought process. Coherent means sticking together, of course. So the more parts of your philosophy that adhere to other parts of your philosophy, so that you can kind of create a web of interconnecting beliefs and concepts, the better. Comprehensible. I once had a bumper sticker on my pickup truck that was deliberately incomprehensible, and it was kind of a joke. It was the bumper sticker said, "Eschew obfuscation." Maybe you've heard that before. Eschew obfuscation. And I got a lot of questions about that because nobody could comprehend what it meant. And if I had to explain it to them, and then it was a sign that was playing a joke on itself, because it was certainly eschewing. It was not eschewing obfuscation. It was promoting obfuscation by using that kind of wording. So something that people can understand, that's pretty good. Comical is always nice. I think the one about everybody's an idiot made me laugh. Some of the others too. Concise. Nobody hates it more when philosophers go on and on and on. So something that you can boil down very nicely. Comprehensive. The more philosophy explains, the better, other things being equal. So again, the one about everybody's an idiot has that virtue. It explains so much. Verifiable. Can people hear your philosophy and then see you putting it into practice and make a connection between what they can verify and what you say it is? And obviously useful. You don't want something that you can't put into practice. Like my mother was saying about most philosophy, but you want something that can be turned into action and be made useful. So, all right, that's enough from me, maybe more than enough. And here's a slide that is meant to prompt you to write down yours. Might be something you've known about for a long time, might be something you're just putting together now. You might look at how well it satisfies any of these criteria and tell the rest of us about it, if you will.
I don't mind starting and let people get some thoughts together. And I must say, this has been written as we were sitting here, so I have not gotten a philosophy of life together completely. But there's someone I really do admire regarding the philosophy of life is the Dalai Lama. And he uses the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, which Four Noble Truths starts out with suffering exists and there's a way out of suffering. And then it lists 8 things that you can do to have a good life. And he lists things like have a valuable job or care for others. Loving and happiness is high, and I have seen him a couple of times in person, have just admired the way he uses a philosophy of life. He is funny. He doesn't drone on, but he can be very witty and smart. Yeah, I think that some of the things I came up with just sitting here was how do you get along in life and make it valuable? Be kind, seek the positive, avoid suffering in self and others, appreciate happiness, love one another, learn to remain calm and meditative, walk softly, seek health, work that is fulfilling and offers something to society and others, and the ability to seek transcendence, whether it's with Jesus or Buddha or whatever is your mechanism for appreciating that there is something greater than yourself or something that you can seek. And I think that that's about all I have to say. Thank
Very
you.
good. Bravo, Pat.
So do we have anybody else who's willing to share? Stan, your microphone's off. How about you?
Is it on? Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
it's on.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, about 30 years ago, I let slip something about which I've been teased mercilessly ever since. I said, in response to people who wanted to go do something fun, I said, well, chores come first. And, that's been thrown back in my face many times. It does evoke the discipline of delayed gratification, which I think is a virtue.
Chores come first, huh?
Yeah, that sounds like something that you might have learned from your parents.
And it's concise.
Yes.
Yeah.
Harvey?
About 35 years ago, I had a terminal case of midlife crisis. And basically because I felt I had totally nothing. I had done nothing. And Joelle told me, you got to do something about it. So I know this sounds a bit bizarre, but I flew to Tahiti and took 6 months to hitchhike across the Pacific Ocean to clear my head so that I could do something that somebody told me you have to do. And that was every morning at breakfast. I got to Hong Kong, and every morning at breakfast, I would add to a list of things that I wanted. And that could be a Porsche. It could be anything. It just didn't matter. And I got up to about 80 or 90, and I couldn't think of anything else. And the idea was start taking them off to find out what was important. And it was pretty easy until I got down to about number 10. Then I had to really make some decisions like, do I want to have children? And I decided I don't want to have children. And I got down to 3 things, and they were absolutely irreducible. Those were the 3 things that I wanted in life. An example of one of them, I had to think about what I do. So I said, I want to be satisfied with what I do with my life. That. And then the lesson I had learned was that if you focus on what it is that you truly want, whatever that is, not involving anybody else, the universe is incredibly vast and will bring you along a path. Because if you try to decide what the path is from where you are to those objectives, you're eliminating the myriad of other ways that can happen. And since that time, as Joelle knows, I haven't changed one little bit. I mean, it gave me the desire to live.
That's
Okay.
great. Very nice.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Joelle, how about you? Do you have anything to share? No?
No, not really.
Okay. Ron, you've been quiet. How about you?
Well, I've been pondering, and the best I can do is go back to my Boy Scout motto: trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Just jotted those down as we were discussing, and I'm thinking,
Obedient.
I kind of try to be those things, but there's a few of them are not so important as others. But I guess
That's a great one.
Yeah. I'll share mine. It's pretty
Yeah.
simple. Don't shut doors and be the best person I can be.
What do you mean by don't shut doors?
Don't shut doors. I knew you were going to ask. Many times I've been faced with a new opportunity and been hesitant to walk through that door to that new opportunity. 90% of the time when I took it, it was the right thing for me to do. And once I was there, I tried to be the best I could be in that situation. So I've learned that by keeping an open mind and an open heart to new experiences, to new people, and this goes for relationships too. You have to be open, and then once you're there, be the best person you can be.
Very good.
Can I add another one in a more serious vein?
Yeah, sure.
In honor of, in memory of Justice Ginsburg, I've decided to not listen to or watch any news until after the election,
Good for you.
which brings to mind this Bible verse. I don't think anybody's actually quoted a Bible verse as a philosophy of life, but I think this pretty well sums it up for me. And I don't always agree with things that St. Paul has to say, but I do with this one. In Philippians, he says, finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things.
So can I infer from the election coverage that there's not very much of those qualities given for us to think about?
You got it, bro.
Amen, brother. Well, thank you very much.
May I add one thing?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
I think as I listen to people and review my thoughts, I think coming to terms with yourself is a very hard, it's a hard thing to do. And if you can find that and be comfortable with it, I think as Harvey mentioned, I think your life will be much easier. And then you will be able to prepare the specifics of how you're going to increase your actions for your philosophy of life.
Very
Okay,
good.
thank you.
Come to terms with yourself. Okay. Well, farewell to everybody. I appreciate the interaction. Any other final points? And then now we got to get out there and live by what we said we're going to try to.
Thank you, Olin. This was really interesting, and I'm so glad that I got to host this with you. It's always fun to be around when you're doing a presentation, but this is very thought-provoking, and hopefully we all walk away with a little more focus on what our philosophy on life is. So I had never written mine down before.
Well,
And as you were talking, I was trying to think like what has been my philosophy, and that was what I came up with.
don't
It
shut the
sounds like
door
Ron-
and be the best you can be, huh?
yeah.
Well, Olin, can I ask you a question?
Oh, sure.
It's a very simple, get out and vote today. Where does that
Already did.
fit?
Yeah,
Where does that fit?
All right, that's great. And we will, like I said, we'll probably need to depend on our philosophy of life going forward. from
Yes.
this day.
Yes.
Okay, well, goodbye.
Thanks for everybody's
You did a-
participation. And it was fun to have people from all over. So this is really a global
Yeah.
audience here, and I appreciate that. So
Susan,
Olin,
you
thank
did a-
you.
You did a great job hosting and made it just work like a charm. So thank you.
Well,
very-
we've done this. You and I have done this. Is the second one you and I have done together,
Yeah.
and I really enjoy it. It
Great.
works really well. So
Too.
have a great day. If you haven't voted, go vote, and we'll hopefully see you again.
Great.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks,
very
Olin.
much.
Good to visit with all of you.
Thank you.